The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Good evening and welcome to the July edition of For the Love of Words. Tonight we have poet Wayne Craig Fredericks as our guest. And Wayne is an Easton resident, but he was originally from Quincy, moved to Easton in October of 1961. He is a 1976 graduate of Oliver Ames. Following his graduation, he was educated at Bates College in Maine, Cardiff University in Wales, the United Kingdom, here in Stonehill College, and at the Brockton Professional School of Bartending. He studied philosophy, politics, economics, calculus, astronomy, French, art appreciation, and writing. And interestingly, and we will talk about this during the interview, his degree is in bartending. So Craig has been writing and performing poetry since 1996. He writes a few good poems a year, hundreds of bad ones, and before the pandemic was getting himself out to at least 8 open mics a year in Easton, Brockton, and Plymouth libraries and art museums. Wayne Craig Fredericks was one of the very few selected poets to participate in the Soaring Without Limits Healing Through the Arts program that was presented by Brockton's Poet Laureate Phil Vesoris and brain injury advocate Sandy Topalian and Paul Engel of the Brockton Public Library. He calls the 5 poems that were published in those programs for those 5 different events Limit Soaring Sonnets. So tonight, we welcome Wayne Craig Fredericks. Thank you for being here, Wayne.
Great to be here.
So I would like to follow up on a couple of things that I mentioned.
Imagine, yeah.
How do you get from Bates College in Maine to Cardiff University in Wales?
You know, I applied to Bates because they had a good junior abroad program. I was still in school. I just got my driver's license, and I decided I needed another goal because I've been planning on my driver's license for like 12 years. And so I decided I wanted to go junior abroad. So I applied to schools that had a good program. Bates let me, I loved Bates. Dartmouth has a good program. They turned me down. Bowdoin turned me down. So Bates, but.
So you went as an undergraduate program to?
I did my first 2 years at Bates, and
Yep.
you have to apply. You don't automatically, it's not a transfer thing. Actually, the first school I applied to turned me down as well. I don't get accepted everywhere I apply. And so Cardiff was my second choice. I also changed my major from was going to be law, really, and to philosophy, because I heard it was easier to get in as a philosopher. So I became a philosopher my junior year, and I spent the rest of my college. And then I came back to Bates for my senior year. I stayed for my whole year. I had more than enough credits, but I got an extension on my thesis. And it ended up being 29 years before I turned in the thesis, and I never did put it in those little official things. Well, so I ended up not getting a degree from Bates.
Well, there is definitely a connection between being a philosopher and being a bartender, because bartenders need to be philosophers most of the time.
When my dad, they have this thing at Bates called the short term, and you take 6 weeks of one subject and you get 2 credits. And when my dad found out I was going to be studying philosophy for 6 weeks, just taking one course, he had me come home and take a 2 months course at Brockton Professional School of Bartending, which had just opened up, that it was a year old, because he figured out, or as soon as he heard that I was going to be a philosopher, that I was going to need a bartending degree. Although I did get a philosophy professor kind of upset when I kind of disappeared. And then, of course, I was away the next year. So I came back like a year and a half later, and he was like, where you been?
We want to talk about also, you had told me in your biographical information that you sent me that there are 3 completely different stories about how and why you got started writing poetry. So, and all three are true. So please tell us what these three stories are.
Well, it was 1996, and if you were around in 1996, Comet Hale-Bopp came by, and it started in February, and it was actually around for 18 months, but it was the first, when it was first approaching the sun, that you could see it best here, and you could best see it in the morning. And you go out, so I'd be out in my front yard in like February, and the snowdrops, which is a kind of bulb that comes up really early. Actually, they come out in January. They'd be with me. And then it was snowdrops and crocuses came out in March. Snowdrops, crocuses, daffodils, and then tall tulips, in turn, greet Comet. And so I was writing this poem. That's not the whole poem, but I'm actually going to do it later.
Oh, good.
But that poem came about just standing out in the front yard, watching a comet in the sky with these bulbs around me for months, for 5 or 6 months until summer came, and then the timing changed and it wasn't quite the same thing. But that spring, I spent a lot of time standing in my front yard. So that's one story. I started writing because I was watching a comet and I'm talking to these bulbs. That's what the poem is about.
Very interesting.
Petals peak, sneak open, grin much, life in mud such as we forget. Anyway, it's comet. That's one story. There's another story. I was doing a lot of sermons at Unity Church. I go to Unity Church. Actually, I ended up here because I go to church a lot. I met Priscilla.
Priscilla.
I went to
yes, co-host.
I went to the Holy Trinity Church on Mother's Day because my mom still goes there, and I surprise her every year by showing up at church. And Priscilla reminded me, she had talked about her other program, growing up in Easton, and
Yep.
we had talked about that. And actually, David Ames had talked to me about doing a program like 20 years ago. And I never, so anyway, when she found out I was a friend of Rich's and I was a poet,
Rich Berg.
Rich Berg, who was the host here, and we talked and everything, and she's heard a couple of my poems on occasion. I've known her for a long time, since I was a kid, I guess. So that's how active. I hadn't gone to church on Mother's Day. But anyway, so I go to church a lot. And anyway, and from 1984 to 1996, I was chair of the worship committee. Sandra Hill helped out sometimes, Dick Hill's wife. But I was very involved. And if you're that involved, and I got to decide who did the lay-led services. Holly Bell, our minister, only did 3 services a month, 9 months of the year. It's 27 plus Christmas Eve, so 28 services a year. So it leaves time for lay-led services. And when I was deciding who did them, it was twice a year was the right amount that I should do. And anyway, at 1996, we had a discussion. They were moving the summer services up an hour, and I pointed out that daylight savings time had already done that. And they'd had enough of me at that point. They voted me out of the chair and dragged me kicking and screaming. This is the way I remember the story. Out into the step. There used to be a step in front of the church. Now we've raised it up for really clever solution. There's no step if you dug down. But at the time, there was a step in a puddle. There was always a puddle there because of low. And I was dumped in the puddle and everything. And I was never allowed to pick again who did it until they chose. So now it's like once every 4 or 5 years that I do a sermon.
Okay.
So I had to do something else. So I tried storytelling, mostly out of the blue, different locations in Cambridge. I tried telling jokes at the lounge at Westgate. What's that lounge called? I forgot. Anyway, the bowling alley lounge. But poetry ended up the best solution for me. So I started doing that. And so it was because I wasn't doing sermons anymore. Now there's a third story.
Okay.
My dad died in February of that year, and he was on a cruise. He was only 62, and I worked for him, Fredericks and Girardi Insurance. I'd been working with him for 13 years. I was a licensed insurance agent for 20 years, and his junior partner and I, who'd always gotten along, started not getting along, and my computer got taken away, and then the phone got moved away. And I had to show up at work because I was representing my mom's interest, and I still had to show up. But Dennis would come by every once in a while to make sure I wasn't actually talking to anyone or doing anything, because he'd never trusted. I used to bring the computer tapes home, and he didn't understand why I did that. But this was the old days when you would do it, you'd run a backup, and I'd bring it home. Anyway, I think Dennis is still around. I shouldn't talk bad of him, but we didn't get along for that year and a half it took. So I was left sitting at a desk in my office with nothing to do, right, and with someone walking by and making sure I wasn't doing anything. So if I was writing poetry, that was good. So I was literally being paid to do nothing. So I had this pad, and meanwhile I had Comet Hale-Bopp in the sky, and I wasn't doing sermons. And Nancy Brady Cunningham was running a poetry thing at Blackthorn Tavern.
Yep.
And Main Street Cafe was Sean Theo's thing.
Yep.
So I started doing that. There was venues to do it. Once I found venues, then I was encouraged. So
I remember
that's actually 4 stories now. I've just added them.
I remember you at both venues, Main
Yes,
Street Cafe and the Blackthorn Tavern. I remember you at both.
I had more hair.
We all did. What would you say, besides the different ways in which you got started, when did you first become aware of poetry? When did you first become interested in reading poetry? If you remember.
Well, I liked seeing Emily Dickinson verses to Gilligan's Island theme as a kid. I've been to Robert Frost's grave in Bennington. My son Guy went to Bennington. I've been to the Poe statue. Of course, I read a lot of Poe as a kid. It was in the horror section, some of his stuff.
Yep.
So his stuff about the birds and the heart that won't stop, I probably read that when I was 10 or 12. I used to read a lot of science fiction, horror stuff, so I would have found that. I guess I could, but it was philosophy more that I was writing. I wasn't writing poetry because I actually used to write a lot of philosophical essays, believe it or not, even after I left college, and then I would turn them into sermons. That's one of the reasons that people hated my sermons so much, is because they were
too philosophical.
They were either that, or they were about politics, the Ninth Amendment. I'd go on for 20 minutes about the Ninth Amendment, how important it was. In physics, one was called a kitten's pounce, which was about a length of time. And then I said was like life was like that. And all pounces were the same. I said all life was the same. It's not true that some life is longer than others. That upset people. So anyway, I still do. I did one just last year. So I still do sermons like once every 4 or 5 years.
You still put the philosophical theme into it?
No, I throw poetry into it. And they hate that. I've actually done Vogon poetry, which was particularly bad.
I'm sorry.
That's from Douglas Adams. He writes about Vogon. It's the worst poetry in the entire galaxy.
Really? Is there any other type of poetry you work into your sermons?
I write original poem, and then I
your own poetry.
Yeah, and then I'll do that. That'll take me like 16 seconds, and I'll take the rest of the 20 minutes trying to explain it.
Okay. Now, have you been to any venues recently that we would be aware of?
Yes, I was at Marshfield. It's outdoors, part of the arts festival there. What's her name? Liz.
It's an annual event, right?
Yes. Have you been there? Yes. She has.
Under a big oak tree or some kind of tree?
It's outside. It's right on a grass lawn and everything. It was really nice. I've been meaning to go to that. So I went there, and there's people walking by in the fair, and they can sit down and watch for a little bit, and you can hear a band playing from down the street, and there's food trucks.
Yeah, so a very old time type of fair.
They sold out of lobster rolls pretty quick, I noticed. Not a lot of people sitting down. People would come and join it, and some people that were walking by seemed to enjoy it. Considering that, they had 4 really good features, there should have been a bigger crowd, but you never get a big crowd at poetry events.
No, it's hard to do. Well, tonight you have the crowd of the audience of For the Love of Words, and I know, even though you say You write just a few good poems a year. I know the poems you're going to read tonight are those good poems. So we look forward to hearing you. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Hi, Craig Fredericks, Randall Street. Wayne Craig Fredericks, to be exact. Friends call me Craig. With apologies to Robert Frost. Two paths diverged in a black pine wood, and the path to the left was more traveled by, and that's where I went the first walk, hoping it led to, I don't know, a fishing hole or a secret circus. I did meet a nice couple out walking their dog. Two paths diverged in a black pine wood. Next walk, I took the path less traveled by. It led first to some stone walls, then someone's backyard. Retracing my steps and finding an even less traveled by path, I came to a hunting perch high in an oak tree, an old oak tree. And two paths diverged in a black pine wood. My third walk, I started out in the less traveled by path. Then after 10 minutes, I bushwhacked left through a clearing I expect formed over shallow New England ledge. Then I climbed over a couple car-sized glacial erratics, and then through an aspen grove, until I found again the more traveled by path. Two paths diverged in a black pine wood. Looking to make a day of it, I brought a small pack containing water, a ham sandwich, and hot honey mustard, some chips, and a couple apples, bug spray, some of that stuff you put on cuts so they don't get infected, a sweatshirt, flashlight, and a compass. And I also had my wallet and pocket knife and lighter and tissues I always bring on those walks. And lastly, I brought a roll of Christmas red ribbon, which I cut and tied to branches to mark new trail. Two paths diverged in a black pine wood. I know those paths. I know where they go. Mud is alive. I can tell by the smell. I just can't tell what it's thinking. Down at the beach, look, smell. Mud in the shell. I still can't tell what it's thinking. This is where it gets tricky. Mud is alive. You can tell by the smell. You just can't tell what it's thinking. No, it gets wicked tricky here. Everywhere now, look, smell, mud in the shell. When riding is like fighting wildcats, breathing air, trees, green grass, and mud. When I'm feeding squirrels, I believe I know. That's when my poems are crud. Manifold shadows shape these destinies. Timelines now form for fresh-lit soul. From atop the ridge, fine view, a village. Village view, alley, roofs, steeple, then ridge. This is a poem I've been doing when I go out lately. It's the one I did in Marshfield. Oh, I need my towel for this. I went to the go off the Deutsche Bank over at TPC Boston and Norton. I used to go over here. It's not there anymore. They had Alfa Romeo stand. If you sat in the Alfa Romeo and listened to the stereo system, was this attractive female seller, and you got a free Alfa Romeo towel and a sleeve of golf balls, which seemed like a pretty good deal to me. Anyway, that's why I got this. I brought this towel. Hut boardwalk. She was barefoot, and the boardwalk was hot, so she was skipping one mossy crack oasis to the next, occasionally finding maybe a fig leaf of shadow. So I threw down my towel, and she trounced on it and leapt on. Thank you very much. And I know using props is a little bit cheating, but I really needed it for that. This was set for the poem I was talking about. That was one of the first poems I ever wrote. Hail Bob Bubs. I'm out in the front yard looking at the comet, and it looked kind of like an exclamation mark. It wasn't entirely straight, but it was pretty. That's pretty much what it looked like. So it was written while the bulbs in the mud, starting with the first snowdrops of the new year and lasting through the dying tulips, met the brilliant comet, which looked a bit like this, and I have a exclamation mark. A few years back, it was real. I'm reading this from my H2G2 account, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was 1990 something, social media thing. I had posted this there, and so that's where I found it. I printed it out. Hillbop bulbs, snowdrops, crocuses, daffodils, tall tulips in turn greet comet. Snowball falls, whip snapped round the sun. Northeast sunrise, northwest sunset. Earth orbits tip-topped on a run. Skies clear, surprise, clouds close, wind wet. Petals peak, sneak open, grin much, life in mud such as we forget. There you go. This one was also written out in a yard, standing in a yard. In Finland, I accompanied my mom on a trip to find her grandmother's unmarked grave. It was while Kevin Garnett got traded to the Celtics, so that tells you, it must have been 2008. I was over there when that happened. We also visited the unmarked grave of Douglas Adams at that time, which was in London. He now has a gravestone. It's in North London, Highgate Ceremony, right around the corner from Karl Marx. You can find Douglas Adams in London. But anyway, I was in Finland, and this yard had barns, but no cows, and a place for chickens, chicken coops, I guess you call them, but no chickens, and a lot of evidence of the glaciers and everything. And it was a mowed yard, but around the edges there were all these wildflowers. And anyway, the lawn flowers, I call it the roar of the birch. The lawn flowers rise so high, they muzzle the buzz of the bees. The birds and creatures of the wood are content enough. They feel no need to peep or squeak. Cows and chickens and great glaciers are heard, but only an echo as they have moved on. The sound that pounds the silent thought is the roar of the birch as their roots crush gravel, and the branches rudely shove the still air. And the tender tops wave, and they shout, and they wave, and they shout, and they wave, and they shout out, here, here, here. Thank you very much. Oh, I wrote that down in their guest book. They have a guest book in there, and I think they liked it. I was thinking, I did these poems. For the healing, Soaring Without Limits, and Healing Through the Arts. I did all 5 years. I got 3 of the books here. And the first one, you might be wondering why I've been carrying these around. On Facebook, I'd mentioned that if I couldn't find 20 minutes worth of poems, I was going to juggle. I've 2 granddaughters. One just turned 2 last month. The other one turned 3 last month. The other one's turning 2. And they love to juggle, but they like it because I'm not very good at it, and they go flying. But the thing is, the plan is if I don't have 20 minutes worth of poetry here, I'm going to juggle for you. But it's kind of a joke. But I think I have more than enough, really. I'll juggle for you later if there's, demand. If you shout for it. The very first year of this program, I was able to see the artists. This was done by people that have suffered brain injuries. And they paired it with local artists. And I look at the picture, and then I wrote a poem. And then I bought the picture. I wasn't able to do that every year. Squirrels do see, they put on the back, they put the picture, the poem that I was hanging on the wall of the library, the 3rd floor of the Brockton Library, hung there for a month, and they had a thing where you get to read it. John was there as well. He also participated in this program. So my poems hung there for a month, and they had a thing. It was on their cable station over there, the Brockton version of this channel. So squirrels do see color, you know. Well, I call this squirrel scampers into poem. Squirrels do see color, you know, especially yellow and sky blue. And when we spot ripe, yummy nuts, well, pause for tail shake, it's almost like they seem to glow. So the squirrel scurries onto painted grass below. I'm full grown, but still young, and bushy-tailed with dark look. On a day so nice, even lawn flowers scamper beside bubbly brook. There are a couple crows around, but they know who would win. And there's a road whose purpose I have no clue, and a big old wooden structure whose attic I've been in. That was the first year. The next year would have been 2017. And my painting's up here, and John's is down here. We're both on the same thing here. And this painting sort of looks like confetti to me. It was untitled. We'll see. Artist Michelle Dempsey. Sorry, I forgot the name. Boston Common Squirrel's View of the Patriots Parade. Hi, I like to pair the food I eat with the trees where I dine, and so I'll eat like popcorn and a maple and cones around the pine. And here in the Common, this Boston Common I'm talking about, with food and branches in quick reach. My brother likes this one. His restaurant's right there on West Street, Fajitas and Ritas, and down back deck on the corner. But so he likes this one. And here in the Common, with food and branches in quick reach, snacks, especially cheesy, go best with the old copper beach. Look, fresh crowd of people in red, white, and blue. I smell another parade for the Pats. Last week it was woman with clever signs and a clue, all friendly, except squirrels don't much trust cats, so took a sec to take to all the pussy hats. They had a Patriots parade 1 week after the pussy hat demonstration. This was that year. Above sidewalk now, just side Tremont. Wicked awesome viewing place. Duck boat rolling under. I get a good look. Oops, nuts, confetti in the face. And there's a picture of the confetti in the face of the squirrel watching the parade. Maybe one more, then I'll do something different. This one. There's no such thing as cat cute. And for this one, I brought along a printout, so it'd be nice and big. The squirrel's looking at this. And the picture, I think I got the first line of this later poem. It goes, there's no such thing as cat cute. It's about this painting called Cat Cute that shows this cat. The painting is by Robert Elliott. And the painting shows this cat. Now, whether it's cute is in some dispute. By me, that is, and I'm a squirrel, so this poem by this squirrel. There's no such thing as cat cute. This isn't tricky math like figuring a cube root, or a clever trick like juggling grapefruits. Look at those eyes. Two in the front, both locked on you. And in this case, both terrifyingly blue. Doesn't matter, they're so blue, makes the sky look green in comparison. Now take a bunny, now we're talking cute. And chipmunks, they're squirrels. They're okay, underground now, but we'll see them early May. But one thing we'll not see is a cute cat. You know they chase doves? I mean, who does that? Thank you. Moving on. Girl Scrappers. I got more of these. Unexpressed thought. What is it I meant to write? I'm sure I had an idea. There once was a thought, learned to spell consciousness. There once was a thought, learned to see sight. Maybe I'm crazy, learned to see consciousness. Maybe I'm crazy, learned to smell sight. Maybe I'm crazy, but if I'm right, there once was this thought I could have made clear. I read that before I try to read my philosophy thesis, the one that took me 29 years to write. This is the first, this is a poem, there's a poem called Bates College Philosophy Thesis. It was part of what I eventually turned in. I did get an exchange with my professor. I'd kept in touch all those years. He referred to my short philosophical poems as aphorisms. So ever since then, I've called my short philosophical poems aphorisms. So, and I did get credit for my thesis. I mentioned short terms. My senior year, I turned in what I'd been working on all year. It was sort of a mishmash of stuff. It wasn't complete. And I got credit for my short term. And I also got credit that year my dad brought me home. I managed to somehow pass. So I did get credit for short term all those years. It's one of the reasons I had more than enough credits when I left Bates to graduate. But anyway, this is called Bates College Philosophy Thesis. It was done March 2009. That's when I sent it in. You know, 1980. I was supposed to graduate from Bates in 1980. I did get an extension. I don't know if it was 20, the length of the extension wasn't spelled out. Apparently it wasn't 29 years. But this seemingly neglected, this never goes well, I should tell you, by the way, because it has footnotes, like theses do, but poems don't. So I've tried reading the poems at different, the footnotes at different parts of the poem, and it never works out anyway. But anyway, I like to read it at different places, so this isn't going to go well. Here's my Bates College Philosophy Thesis. This seemingly neglected, lately unexpected paperwork, this thesis, here given title, Unlimited Time Elapsed, should be read as an attempt to wickedly sum, where W equals V, Ludwig Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. In particular, I refer to Ludwig's self-described fundamental idea on the possibility of propositions. And then here's a footnote from the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Great book, you should read it, like all the time. This is from the part labeled 4.0312, and it's on the possibility of proposition. It says the possibility of propositions is based on the principle that objects have signs as their representatives. My fundamental idea is that the logical constants are not representatives, that there can be no representatives of the logics of facts. That's what Ludwig says. There can be no representatives of the logics of facts. Anyway, go back. In particular, I refer to Ludwig's self-described fundamental ideas, a poem, which in this instance is being called, I think he used a typewriter, constitutes the case. Words appear. They don't make sense, they just touch it. Elucidations on such situations take up much of the world. I missed another footnote. I think he used a typewriter, has a second footnote. And you could look at the bottom, it says, I could ascertain if this is a fact. So, thank you very much.
Welcome to For the Love of Words. Today is July 11th, 2023. And we're in the midst of a really hot and humid period of time. But here at the studio at ECAT, Easton Community Access TV, we have wonderful air conditioning, and I'm so pleased to welcome Samantha, who goes by Sam Babineau. My name is Priscilla Ahlquist-Olsen, your host, and Sam is our July featured musician. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it is. And you are a fiddle player.
Yes.
And I love fiddle playing. I used to play the violin, not a fiddle, years ago. But I just love it. And I think your rendition of the fiddle, what you're doing with the fiddle, is so appropriate now because it's become so popular in the folk world. So tell me, how did you get started?
Sure. So when I was born, my dad really wanted me to be able to read music, and so he picked the instrument that he liked the best, which was violin. And so as I got older, I started taking classical violin lessons, and then around the age of 10, I started playing Irish music, and I started Irish step dancing at the same time, so it all came together at once, and I've been playing fiddle since then.
So your full name is Samantha Babineau, and you told me earlier that you were only 7 when you first put a violin in your hands and
Yes.
started fiddling.
Yes.
What was that like?
I mean, I can remember even being a little younger and having toy violins, and I grew up watching my dad play, so it felt very normal to have a violin in my hands, but when I started playing classical, I really loved just playing. I played in school, and I had a classical teacher. I didn't like classical so much, but when I got playing fiddle, I was just like, this is what I really wanted to be playing. It felt very fun and full of life, and
So, but now you have used the violin as an accompaniment to your original songs. So you are a songwriter as well as a fiddler.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I started I started writing music probably around 4 years ago. So when I first picked up the fiddle, that wasn't anything that I was attempting. This is more of a later addition, but since then, when I started writing, I was writing on piano or ukulele, and because I already played fiddle, I wanted to incorporate that and start playing.
So
my
you're
songs on
playing.
fiddle.
You also play piano and the ukulele.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
Not too well, but
So tell me, how did you get involved in the folk music genre?
yeah, I think that really started with just playing Irish music. So when I started fiddling, I was taking Irish lessons, Irish fiddle lessons, and Irish step lessons. So I was going to jams, and I was going to fiddle camps, which is a huge catalyst for getting into the folk music
Sure.
scene. So
I didn't know they had fiddle camps.
oh yeah, they're wonderful. Yeah.
So you met other fiddlers,
Yeah.
and you keep contact with your.
Yeah, I still have fiddle friends. Yeah. I went to, it was kind of the first time that I was playing music with other people, like fiddle music. So I would practice on my own, and my teacher had a group of us that would play together and go out and play for others. But when I went to fiddle camp, I was met with like jams for the first time and staying up past midnight and just playing music and exchanging tunes with people that you didn't know. And so I would take that experience and work on it all year and then go back to fiddle camp the next summer.
Tell me a little bit about some of the songs you're going to share with us.
Sure. I'm going to be playing a lot of songs from my just released EP called Nightingale.
Oh, so you just released a CD,
Yes,
and it's called
Nightingale.
Nightingale. And why did you pick that name?
I felt like that was the song that there's a
Song called Nightingale.
yes on the EP, and I felt like that was the most the one that had been around the longest and the one that I was really thinking of when I created this EP.
Okay. Now, so we're going to look forward to that. And your songwriting process, how does that start? And what's the process?
Yeah, it depends from song to song. Sometimes it starts with a melody, or sometimes it starts with something I want to write about. It really depends. I think I go back and forth, whereas a lot of people have a structure. I kind of go with whatever strikes me first, whether it's the melody or the story or the tune behind it.
So sometimes you set lyrics to the tune. Other times the tune kind of tells you what you want to say. Okay. And both work beautifully, I'm sure. Now your parents must be very proud of you.
I think so.
Especially your dad, who's the fiddler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that reminds me, did you ever see Fiddler on the Roof?
I've never seen Fiddler on the Roof, no.
No?
I should see it though.
Well, it was on Broadway for a long, long time. But there's, of course, it's the movie version.
Yes.
And you should get that and see it.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's on my list.
So now we're going to hear fiddler Samantha Babineau from Rochester, Massachusetts. And she's going to share with us some of her wonderful songwriting pieces. And I think it's so important to know how you can combine the playing with the singing. Isn't that difficult?
Well, I think it's kind of like guitar or ukulele. You're all instruments. You're playing and accompanying yourself.
And when you play the fiddle, don't you feel that you become one with the instrument, so that you're singing and you're playing and it's just one, you're one person with this instrument, or it becomes part of who you are.
Sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's definitely the goal. You know, you always try to be one with the instrument. So
Yeah. Well, we're going to hear you and we're going to appreciate it. It's going to be wonderful. So thank you so much for being my guest
of course.
on For the Love of the Words. And we're going to hear your words and your inspiring music, all those lovely tunes. And there'll be some foot stomping, won't there?
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me.
Thank you, Samantha Babineau of Rochester, songwriter, fiddler extraordinaire.
Hey there, I'm Sam Babineau. I'm going to be playing some tunes of mine for you. The first one is called Being Green, and it's the first track off of my new EP called Nightingale. I'm new to this mess, and yet it feels like home. Objectivity is mine alone. The always has been, and just the way it is. Make it so hard to fix this. To voice these opinions is to be pushed aside. Met with resistance from the inside. I'm new to this mess and see what you condone. You can't really say you're comfortable. It's not too late to consider a remedy, but you'd rather sell inefficiency. To voice these opinions is to be pushed aside and met with resistance from the inside. How long would it take for you to hear what I've seen? It's not that easy being green. I'm new to this mess and the illogical. I'll start to if I'm not careful. deserve. When they leave, it will be what you deserve. To voice these opinions is to be pushed aside, met with resistance from the inside. How long will it take for you to hear what I've seen? It's not that easy being green. It's not that easy being green. I'm new to this mess and the illogical. I'll start to if I'm not careful. Thank you. The next tune I'm going to play is called Anywhere. This is a song about me getting lost on the ride home, and it's a common occurrence for me. Unfortunately, I do not have the best sense of direction, but I do think there is a nice magical quality to getting lost, especially at night, because you could really be anywhere, it feels like. So this is about that. It's called Anywhere. I'm driving home at the perfect time. It's a deep blue that tricks you into thinking it's not night. No, not quite, not quite. Illuminated from the inside. A warm light catches my eye on a street I don't recognize, but it wraps me tight, wraps me tight. The rooms in bright yellow just get me turned around on roads that I know. And with the thick air, I can forget where I am. I can be anywhere. I'll sit at the shore for a short while. The moon's so full and ripe, I could reach out and take a bite. But then I see something glide. A riverboat on the skyline. Has it always been here, drifting near from another time? Will it drift out of sight? The rooms in bright yellow just get me turned around on roads that I know. And with the thick air, I can forget where I am. I can be anywhere. The rooms in bright yellow just get me turned around on roads that I know. And with the thick air, I can forget where I am. I can be anywhere. you. So the next tune that I'm going to play is called Ganymede, and this is based on the moon that Galileo discovered. And he figured it out by watching the night sky and finding that this star in particular was disappearing and then reappearing, and then it would move, and then it would disappear again, and then reappear. And just by watching this pattern, he found out or deduced that it was going behind another celestial body. So I think that's pretty cool and interesting. So this is called Ganymede. Trained eyes to the night sky, tracking moving lights. Fashion your pattern into something that feels right. Closing the distance ain't as easy as it seems. Each night that I see you just adds to your elusivity. Ganymede, Ganymede, look at what you've instilled in me. Ganymede, oh, Ganymede, look at what you've instilled in me. I've been looking for what I think could be found. If I hold the pendulum right, you'll come swinging downtown. Maybe it's time for you to see the rings on the other side. That way I won't have to fight my next time around. Ganymede, Ganymede, look at what you've instilled in me. Ganymede, oh, Ganymede, look at what you've instilled in me. Ganymede, oh, Ganymede, look at what you've instilled in me. So this is the last song I'll play for you, and it's also the title track off of my last EP. You can find it in all the streaming places, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, on my website, and it's a bit of a dance tune. So this is called Nightingale. Rent you on a bright morning, I called your name in a song. I've been patiently waiting. Rent you on a bright morning, the lark sing to you as well. Watch my defense dispel. You gifted hops and barley, prudence is proved unkind for catching and keeping your eye. You hops and barley, a flowing green shouts was past, and still you pay me no mind. Met you with arms wide open, the moon shone for you that night. She smiled, you held me tight. Met you with arms wide open, the nightingale was told, love only favors the bold. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.